It's all right. Let's get you changed right away. On a snowy day, my mother-in-law Kate, who suffers from dementia, lost control and wet herself because of the cold. Accepting it as something unavoidable, I started preparing to clean up when my husband Vincent came home drunk. Seeing the situation, he instantly grasped what had happened and made a disgusted face. "Are you kidding me? Take her to the pond in the yard and wash her off," he said. I was speechless at his words. When he abruptly grabbed his mom's hand to drag her outside, I desperately resisted. "Stop, please, don't do this. This old broad with dementia won't even remember what happens. By tomorrow, she'll be laughing and eating like nothing ever happened, right?" Vincent's laughter pierced my ears. He ignored me and continued pulling her outside. Holding onto her body as tightly as I could to resist, I was dragged out too. The sound of the door closing echoed behind me. The lock clicked, and a cold fear stabbed through me. "Stop joking. Open the door. Kate will catch a cold." I banged on the door, shouting for help. But Vincent ignored us. It was as if we had ceased to exist to him. In the freezing night, left outside, despair enveloped me. The cold bit into my skin, and I couldn't stop worrying about Kate. She looked at me gently and said in a kind voice, "It's all right, Cynthia. I'm here for you." Snowflakes gently drifted down from the pitch-black sky. It was freezing cold. In this condition, both Kate and I would freeze to death. The next morning, the pond in the yard was covered with ice. In this cold, it was a usual sight. Vincent, half asleep, opened the window casually and glanced toward the pond, and then he let out a scream, leaping into the icy pond. "My name is Cynthia. I was left behind in a small bundle, beginning my life as a solitary being." The cries of a baby left in front of a children's home echoed into the uncaring sky, unheard by anyone. In December, the bitter cold left my tiny fingers frost-bitten, scars that remained even as I grew up, becoming a source of my insecurities. Without knowing the faces or names of my parents, time passed, and I turned 18. After graduating from the children's home, I moved to a neighboring town and started working as a general office clerk for a small company dealing in household mineral water. One day, I met Vincent, a representative from a new client. His eyes held a certain warmth, something that felt special. During a moment at work, I found myself revealing something deeply buried in my heart. I grew up in a children's home. The moment those words left my mouth, I remember how my heart pounded heavily. I couldn't stop wondering about his reaction. However, Vincent showed a hint of surprise before quietly expressing his understanding. He didn't offer a denial or affirmation, but simply murmured, "I see," while looking at me with gentle eyes, which gave me a small sense of relief. He invited me to dinner, and we shared a meal at a restaurant. As I ate the meatloaf he recommended, he began to quietly talk about his family. He spoke about how his mom left, and a woman named Kate, his stepmother, came into his life. Even though he wanted to live with his mom, financial reasons forced him to be raised by his dad. Kate stayed at home as a housewife, but he felt it was a marriage motivated by money, which bred feelings of rebellion and dislike in him. Through his words, I could sense a loneliness similar to mine. "I'm starting to forget her face, my mom's face. I don't want to forget her." His words resonated deeply within me. I, too, carried the sadness of not having a mom. As I listened to Vincent's story, I felt the distance between us slowly shrinking. It was as if we understood each other on a deeper level because we both carried loneliness within us. I reflected on my past. Life in the children's home was far from easy. I had very few people I could call friends, and the fear of being abandoned constantly churned in my heart. Vincent's words about his biological mother resonated deeply with me, mirroring my own feelings toward Mom. I realized that, because I never had a mom, I had always yearned for that warmth. I think I understand how painful it is not to have a mom, I said. Vincent looked at me with surprise, then gradually smiled. I see, Cynthia, you're the same as me. As we shared the loneliness in our hearts, we gradually grew closer. His kindness began to heal the wounds in my heart, little by little. When two lonely souls meet, perhaps a special bond is born. From that point on, we started sharing stories of our pasts during breaks at work. He opened up about his mom, his relationship with Kate, and his inner struggles. By listening to him, I slowly came to understand him more. And before I knew it, I wanted to know him even better. Vincent was someone who spoke honestly about his feelings. I began to love him from the bottom of my heart, and he loved me in return. Through him, I learned how wonderful it is to love someone sincerely, and to be loved in the same way. I can still vividly recall the day I first visited his family home. When we decided to get married, I visited his home with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. His mom, Kate, welcomed me with a warm smile, but there were traces of fatigue on her face. Dark circles lingered under her eyes, and her cheeks seemed slightly hollow. It was clear that the demands of daily household chores were etched into her appearance. The house itself was impeccably tidy and spotless. Family photos adorned various spots, and even certificates of awards Vincent had earned were proudly displayed. As I sat on the sofa, Kate prepared tea for me. What caught my attention were her hands roughened, likely from her household duties. Her fingertips were cracked, and the lines on her palms spoke of her tireless dedication. Noticing my gaze, Kate rubbed her hands together with a shy smile. "My hands get rough from all the waterwork," she chuckled. "Oh, Cynthia, are your hands a little rough too?" "Wait just a moment," she said, rising before I could explain that it was due to frostbite from my childhood. She pulled a small tube of hand cream from a drawer and handed it to me. "It's a gift I received, but I never use it. If you'd like, please take it." Her gentle smile and the small tube of peach-scented hand cream made me smile as well. I opened the lid and dabbed a little on my hands. A sweet peach aroma enveloped my fingertips. "This smells wonderful," I said. "Doesn't it?" "It suits you perfectly, Cynthia," she replied. I glanced at Kate's hands and fell silent. Her hands, worn down from the endless bustle of daily life, filled me with a quiet ache. It was evident how much she loved and cared for her family. Her devotion left a deep impression on me, inspiring both admiration and gratitude. Seeing Kate's selflessness made me look forward to the idea of becoming a mom myself someday. But at the same time, I couldn't help but notice Vincent's cold attitude toward her. He seemed to take her efforts for granted, showing indifference on occasion. While I grew to respect and appreciate her, Vincent's aloofness toward her cast a shadow of unease over my heart. After our marriage, we moved into a multi-generational home. This arrangement came about because Vincent's father, Frank, offered to build a house for us if we agreed to live together. Vincent quickly accepted the idea. When I found out I was pregnant, she became even more supportive of me. Her unwavering care and kindness felt like the love of a mother I had never known. During those days, I began to feel my heart slowly open. Having someone like Kate as my mother-in-law felt like a true blessing. But behind it all, I was unaware of the complex emotions swirling within Vincent. In the middle of my pregnancy, Frank was diagnosed with lung cancer. Kate took on most of the caregiving, and our lives were turned upside down. As his treatments began, there were frequent hospital visits and stays, and Vincent became responsible for driving him to and from appointments. At first, he drove without complaints, but as the trips became more frequent, his frustration started to show, even if he didn't say it outright. "I have a job too, you know. I'm tired. Can't you use a taxi instead?" "You're right. I shouldn't burden you like this." Kate apologized deeply on Frank's behalf, her tone filled with guilt. He could at least drive his dad to his appointments. Even if Vincent claimed he was tired from work, he wasn't particularly busy on his days off. Occasionally, he'd go golfing with his colleagues, though he insisted, "This is work." I found his childish reasoning exasperating, but chose to stay quiet. Without a driver's license, I couldn't offer Kate any practical help or comforting words. Frank didn't seem too different at first, but as time went on, he started sleeping in a hospital bed we bought in preparation for the inevitable. Gradually, Frank grew quieter and began keeping a diary, perhaps to organize his thoughts and emotions. With my pregnancy and Frank's illness overlapping, I started experiencing maternity blues. "Do you think Frank will be okay?" "Who knows?" Vincent replied dismissively. I began to feel a growing emotional distance between Vincent and me, and my anxiety worsened. Communication with him became scarce, and loneliness engulfed me. Amid this, Kate's support became an invaluable lifeline. Her gentle care and reassurances helped me recover little by little. I began to think, is this what a mom's warmth feels like? My appreciation and affection for her deepened. Finally, the long-awaited moment arrived, and our son Justin was born. It was the happiest moment of my life. While I was grateful for Kate's help, Vincent seemed resentful of the good relationship I had with her. This resentment grew, and he began treating Kate even more harshly. "Wash your hands properly after taking care of Dad. What if Justin gets sick because of you?" His tone was cold, ignoring Kate's kindness entirely. Watching this, my heart ached. I had hoped for a peaceful family life, and Vincent's behavior was difficult to accept. As a mom and wife, I juggled love, loneliness, joy, and anxiety, trying to navigate the uncertain future. Justin became the star of our household, a cheerful child who charmed everyone. He especially adored Kate, becoming a complete grandma's boy. In contrast, he wasn't very attached to Vincent, who didn't seem to mind much. There were no picture-perfect father and son moments, like playing catch or taking baths together, but I was content just to have the two of them in our lives. As Justin grew, Frank's health deteriorated further. Despite this, Kate never asked me to help with his caregiving. "Cynthia, just focus on taking care of Vincent and Justin. Frank is my responsibility. Still, please take a break sometimes, Kate. You're pushing yourself too hard." "Thank you, Cynthia," she replied softly. Kate is a kind person. Despite her busy days and no time to visit a beauty salon herself, she always insisted that I go. If I hesitated, she would press money into my hand without a second thought and say, "Take a break." But deep down, what I truly wished for was for Kate to take some rest herself. Sometimes, I felt an overwhelming urge to hug her tightly. If I just followed my heart and hugged her, calling out "Mom," would she embrace me back? That would be strange, wouldn't it? Kate isn't my mom. She's Vincent's mom. But still, I felt certain that if I did hug her, Kate would be kind about it. The only reason I didn't was that I simply didn't know how to. The years went by. Watching a child grow up happens so quickly, and it makes you realize just how short life truly is. The day Justin turned 20 and moved out, my heart was a mix of loneliness and joy at his growth. The days Kate and I had spent working together to raise Justin became cherished memories, warming my heart whenever I looked back on them. But that warmth didn't last long. Frank's condition worsened. After enduring numerous treatments and extended hospital stays, I thought Frank was incredibly brave. Perhaps he had sensed that if he were hospitalized again, he might never return home. Although he wished to spend his final days at home, the sight of him suffering was unbearable. Without consulting Kate, I called for an ambulance. Frank was admitted to the hospital immediately, but the doctors said there was nothing more they could do. He was given medication to ease his pain. Lying in the hospital bed, Frank looked strangely peaceful, almost as if he were no longer truly there. A few days later, the inevitable day arrived. That day, I rushed Kate to the hospital. Frank sought her, and with trembling hands, he stretched out to give her a letter he had been gripping tightly. "Kate, take this," he said in a faint voice. Kate accepted the letter with a solemn expression. It was perhaps Frank's last effort to convey his feelings. Tears threatened to overflow as I silently watched the scene unfold. Not long after, Frank passed away peacefully. Kate struggled to come to terms with his death. It seemed as though something inside her had broken. The house, once always clean and tidy, began accumulating dishes and trash. I took over the household chores entirely. Whether it was due to Frank's death or not, Vincent started to show signs of stress from work, and his words at home turned harsh. "Dad's gone. That should have made things easier around here. So why is the house such a mess?" His words hurt us and cast a shadow over the household. As the monotonous days dragged on, I began noticing subtle changes in Kate. The first signs of dementia appeared about a year after Frank's passing. Her mind seemed to fade little by little. It felt as though something invisible was dissolving into mist and vanishing, leaving me with an unbearable ache in my heart. She began spending more and more time sitting on the sofa in the corner of the room, staring blankly at the television. Her words became fewer, replaced by muttered phrases or repetitive actions. As I started caring for her dementia, she would still, on occasion, smile at me with the same gentle warmth as before. Holding her hands warmly in mine, I reassured her repeatedly. "It's okay, I'm here for you." I thought about how much she had helped me over the years. Now it was my turn to help her. As time went on, her symptoms worsened. Simple tasks she once managed became impossible. Dressing herself or taking a shower turned into challenges. I did my best to care for her with everything I had. One snowy night, amidst the biting cold, I was assisting Kate in the bathroom. The freezing air slowed her movements, and before I realized it, she had an accident. Oh no, it's all right. Let's get you changed," I said, trying to remain calm, though I felt a sudden chill in my chest, unsure of what to do. Just then, Vincent, drunk, returned home. His red, intoxicated eyes quickly assessed the situation, and he shot us a look of pure disgust. "You've got to be kidding me. She stinks. Take her out to the pond and wash her there," he sneered. I was speechless at his words. Without hesitation, he grabbed Kate's arm and began dragging her outside. "Stop it, please, don't do this," I cried, desperately resisting. "She's just a senile old broad. Whatever you do to her, she won't remember it. By tomorrow, she'll be laughing over breakfast like nothing happened," Vincent said with a cold laugh that pierced through me. Ignoring my protests, he continued to drag Kate, and I clung to her, trying to stop him. In the chaos, we were both shoved outside, and the door slammed shut behind us. I heard the click of the lock, and a wave of icy fear washed over me. Vincent, open the door. She's going to catch a cold. I banged on the door, shouting for help, but he ignored me. It was as if we no longer existed to him. Standing outside in the freezing night, despair wrapped itself around us. The bitter cold cut through me like a blade, and my heart ached with worry for Kate. Then Kate looked at me with gentle eyes and said softly, "It's okay, Cynthia. I'm here for you." Her words were like a warm light piercing through the darkness. Though her memories had become fragmented due to dementia, her kindness remained unwavering. I desperately wanted to change our situation. The cold wind slapped my face as soon as we were pushed out. The biting chill seeped into my body, and all I could think of was sending an SOS to anyone to save us. I tightly gripped Kate's hand and hurriedly led her away from the house. A sense of urgency consumed me, as though I was being chased. Where should we go? It's not safe to stay here, I murmured internally. At that moment, Kate looked up at me with trembling eyes and asked, "Cynthia, where are we going?" The cold wind grew harsher, and faint snowflakes began to fall. In the distance, something caught my eye, a faint outline of a structure. "There, that place won't be locked," I exclaimed instinctively. At the edge of the yard was a small shed once used to store farming equipment, though it hadn't been in use since I married into this family. Frank, being a farmer, had kept it around. "Kate, let's head to that shed." Grasping her hand, I led her, running desperately toward the shed. The darkness made it hard to see my footing, and every time I slipped, my heart raced. When we finally reached the shed, the door was slightly ajar, revealing a dim interior. Without hesitation, we slipped inside. The moment we escaped the biting cold, a wave of relief washed over me. Yet, at the same time, unease crept in. Was this place truly safe? "At least this will block the wind for now," I reassured myself as I guided Kate further inside. The dimly lit space was filled with long-forgotten items, cluttered and dusty. Among them were mementos Kate had treasured from her time with Vincent, as well as an old dresser. Kate moved slowly, opening one of the dresser drawers and carefully pulling out a few letters. Holding them in her trembling hands, tears welled up in her eyes as she showed them to me. These are the letters Frank wrote to me before he passed. He always showered me with love. He truly loved me." Her voice quivered, and as I saw her recalling Frank with such tenderness, my own eyes began to sting. "I'm sorry, Cynthia. Vincent may act out in this way, but deep down, he's a kind boy," Kate said softly. Her words clashed with the bitterness I felt toward Vincent's cruelty, and anger rose within me. "This isn't just a prank. You're allowed to be angry, Kate," I said, my frustration spilling out. But Kate shook her head and smiled weakly. "He's still so young in some ways. I just hope he'll grow up and mature someday," she said. Despite being indoors, the shed's thin walls did little to keep out the cold. Kate began to shiver again. Determined to keep her warm, I scanned the shed and spotted an old kerosene heater in the corner. Clearing away some of the clutter, I dragged it out and checked for fuel. Luckily, there was still some kerosene left. I managed to light it, and as the heater warmed up, the chill in the air began to fade. Kate's trembling subsided little by little, her fragile figure seeming slightly at ease in the growing warmth. At that moment, I realized there was a smartphone in my pocket. I had completely forgotten about it in my panic. I quickly decided to call Justin. "Hello, Justin. Sorry to call you out of the blue. Actually," after briefly explaining the situation to Justin, I hung up, knowing he'd be on his way soon. Cynthia. You know, Vincent used to do things like this when he was little, Kate said, her face lighting up with joyful memories. Each story she shared was filled with deep affection. How Vincent couldn't call Kate Mom even though she became his second mother. Yet he ate every meal she cooked without leaving a single bite, and gave her favorite flower on Mother's Day. Kate was fully aware that Vincent harbored some resentment toward her, but she also understood it was because she wasn't his real mom. It takes a very long time to truly understand someone, Kate said, gazing into the distance. I've never given birth to a child, but I always wished he would call me Mom. The usually calm and gentle Kate had eyes red with tears and sighed deeply. Listening to her, I felt warmth spreading through my heart, touched by her profound love. Suddenly, I noticed a burning smell. It was only then that I realized the stove was behaving strangely. What's going on? What? Oh no! Flames shot up suddenly from the stove. Apparently, the stove had accumulated a lot of dust and debris from being unused for so long. I hadn't noticed it in the dark. What do we do now? In an instant, the fire spread to nearby furniture and began burning fiercely. Panic and fear overtook me. Kate, we have to get out of here, I shouted, but Kate was frozen with fear and couldn't move. What should I do? What should I do? My mind was spinning in confusion. The flames spread rapidly, surrounding us in no time. I reached for my smartphone, but in the chaos, I had dropped it. I couldn't even call the fire department. Kate, hurry! Braving the intense heat, I tried to pull her to safety, but the warehouse was filling with smoke, making it hard to see. We desperately aimed for the exit, but Kate collapsed halfway. Please, get up, Kate. My legs. I can't move. Despair clouded my vision, and hopelessness surged through me. Just when I thought it was over, I heard the sound of a car approaching from outside. It felt like a ray of hope piercing through the darkness. I screamed at the top of my lungs. Someone, help us! At that moment, the warehouse door was flung open violently. My heart leapt in my chest. I closed my eyes and prayed to God. Please, save us. The next morning, I woke up shivering in the cold. What had happened the night before felt like a dream, but the chilling fear brought me back to reality. Memories of being thrown out by Vincent, the fire in the warehouse, and Kate flooded my mind. Now I was sitting in the back seat of Justin's car as he drove, sleep-deprived and foggy-headed, heading back home. The moment we arrived, a scream erupted from the direction of the yard. My heart pounded, and I rushed out of the car, heading for the yard. What greeted my eyes was Kate's cardigan, floating on the frozen pond. No way. Are you kidding me? Vincent, staring at the pond from the window, screamed and leapt into the pond without hesitation. The ice cracked beneath him, and he plunged into the freezing water. I felt like my heart was going to stop. Last night, as Kate walked to the warehouse after wetting herself, she had mentioned feeling unwell and discarded her cardigan. Apparently, it had fallen into the pond. Vincent must have jumped to a terrible conclusion, leading to this chaotic scene. Desperately reaching for the cardigan in the water, Vincent scanned the surroundings. He must have feared the worst, that someone had drowned in the not-so-deep pond. Once he grabbed the cardigan and confirmed no one was in the water, he let out a sigh of relief. But that relief was short-lived. It seemed he had noticed the peculiar smell of smoke wafting from the direction of the fields. Climbing out of the pond, shivering, Vincent turned to face the burned-down warehouse with a grim expression. Dad. Justin, having parked the car and returned, shouted angrily at Vincent as he stormed into the yard. Justin's face was filled with rage as he confronted Vincent sharply. Mom told me everything. What the hell were you thinking, Justin? Why are you here? And what's with this burnt smell? The barn caught fire? You locked Mom and Grandma outside on a freezing night. What would you have done if something worse had happened? His voice thundered as if to lash Vincent with blame. Vincent kept making excuses, insisting it wasn't his fault, but Justin's eyes showed no sign of backing down. The heated reprimand from Justin left me feeling slightly intimidated. At that moment, I had realized I still had my smartphone and called Justin, who lived about 2 hours away. It was Justin who had come to our rescue when Kate and I were in danger. By the time Justin arrived at the warehouse, the fire was already raging. Although we managed to escape on our own, Justin immediately called the fire department, and we were rushed to the hospital. Vincent, having fallen asleep, didn't even notice the commotion. The fire was eventually extinguished, and Justin, after confirming our safety, intended to confront Vincent. Though I had suffered minor burns on my hands and feet, I couldn't hold back my urge to confront Vincent. Even though it was just minor injuries this time, it could have been much worse. Kate sustained minor injuries but had inhaled smoke, so she was hospitalized as a precaution. Please, Justin, we need to make Vincent understand about Kate. He has to realize what's important. My resolve was firm. Justin hesitated but couldn't sway my determination. Understanding most of the situation, Vincent let out a heavy sigh, his wet body trembling slightly. What a commotion. What are you even saying? It's your fault they were put in danger. It was just a fire, wasn't it? Honestly, how careless. Who was the one who kicked them out of the house? Confronted by his son's fiery retort, Vincent was left speechless. We decided to take him to the hospital to confront the reality of Kate's condition. In my heart, I felt a strong determination somehow. This situation needed to change. Praying that Kate would be all right, we got into the car. Hold on a second. She's in the hospital, right? Then it's fine, isn't it? I don't need to go. She'll be discharged soon enough anyway. Just get in the car already. Justin's sharp tone left Vincent with no choice but to reluctantly climb into the vehicle. I couldn't help but feel surprised and proud seeing Justin, who had once been so small and timid, now expressing his emotions so boldly, even anger. After arriving at the hospital and completing the check-in process, the three of us, Justin, Vincent, and I, made our way to Kate's room. Though her condition was mild, she had been admitted for precautionary reasons. I watched as Vincent spoke with the doctor, who assured him that Kate's life was not in immediate danger. For a moment, relief flickered across Vincent's face, but it quickly turned into dissatisfaction. Cynthia, you were with her, weren't you? How could you let something like this happen? His voice was filled with frustration as he glared at me accusingly. Why don't you stop and think about why I'm even here? I shouted but tried to keep my composure. Then I pulled out the item I had found in the warehouse and thrust it in front of him. It was the letter from Frank that Kate had been clutching tightly even as she collapsed. Frank had given it to Kate in desperation before the end. At the time, I had assumed the letter was addressed to Kate, but I was wrong. It was meant for Vincent. Kate had kept the letter to herself, never handing it over to Vincent. In front of Vincent, I unfolded Frank's letter. Though the writing had faded slightly, I had read it beforehand and began to read it aloud without hesitation. Though my voice trembled, I began reading the letter aloud to Vincent with all the emotion I could muster. To Vincent, when you were born, I made a vow to give you everything I had. The letter continued, however, as your father, I've always regretted not being strong enough to protect you. Your mother left us, abandoning both you and me. As you grew, I wanted nothing more than to love and support you. But every time I saw you, I couldn't help but see your mother in you. And I couldn't reconcile my feelings. I never knew how to talk to you. I paused for a moment, my voice catching. Vincent's expression froze, his eyes wide with shock. Taking a deep breath, I pressed on, reading further into the letter. Kate worked so hard, purely for your sake. She wanted to be your mother and support you no matter what. Vincent muttered, but your refusal to accept her hurt her deeply. You need to understand how much she suffered because she cared for you so much. As I tried to continue, my voice wavered, and tears began to stream down my face. Vincent's expression shifted, now filled with astonishment and uncertainty. Kate did everything she could to fulfill her responsibilities as a mother. She loved you. Please understand her feelings. By accepting her, you can save her too. When I finished reading, a heavy silence fell over the room. Vincent stared into my eyes, speechless. I could sense something changing within him. Had my tears managed to touch his heart? Vincent, please, cherish Kate. She believes in you. I hoped my words would reach him. At first, Vincent seemed unable to accept reality. But as Justin and I continued speaking, his expression gradually softened. He began to realize the foolishness of his refusal to acknowledge her. Grandma always spoke highly of Dad. She said you worked so hard for the family. She asked me over and over to understand you, Justin said. And me too, I added. Since we got married, you've been nothing but kind to me. Do you know why? It's because I'm your wife. You value me because you love yourself and your family. Kate had loved Vincent deeply, more than a biological mother could. To be honest, as someone who had never known parental love, I often felt envious. Kate had directed her pure, unwavering love toward Vincent, and yet, it was Vincent's own heart that had ignored her love. Vincent's voice faltered as he gazed at Kate's sleeping face in the hospital bed. Quietly, he lowered his head. In the days that followed, rumors began to spread at Vincent's workplace. People whispered that he had mistreated us, especially after the fire and Kate's hospitalization. Though Vincent tried to deny the rumors, he apparently lashed out at his colleagues, uttering the same harsh words he had once directed at me and Kate. His frustration only grew, and his coworkers struggled to deal with his unfiltered emotions. The rumors spread even further, leaving Vincent increasingly isolated at work. Justin, aware of the struggles Kate and I had endured, could no longer contain his anger toward Vincent. Following the recent turmoil, every meeting between them erupted into fierce arguments, leaving their father-son relationship beyond repair. I knew how hard Vincent was trying, but even so, I couldn't suppress my frustration with his actions. A few months later, I decided to proceed with a divorce through a lawyer, ensuring favorable terms for myself. The two-family home was to be sold, and the value of the property, including the land, amounted to a significant sum. Most of that fortune was to be allocated to me in exchange for agreeing not to involve the police in the recent incident. What would be the point of sending him to jail now? I felt that such an action wouldn't bring Kate any happiness. I later learned that Vincent, likely fed up with his isolation at work, had quietly resigned. I left the house with Kate and moved in with Justin. Justin, are we imposing on you by staying together? I asked. Not at all. Living together means I get help with cleaning, laundry, and meals. How could this be anything but convenient? He replied with a carefree tone. I knew he was trying to ease my worries. so I made every effort to handle the household chores after we started living together. Justin lived with his mom and his grandmother, who had dementia, and I didn't want him to miss the opportunity to settle down because of us. I planned to find an apartment where Kate and I could live alone in the near future. As our new life began, I felt my heart gradually lighten. Later, Vincent reached out a few times, asking to reconcile. The calls always came late at night, and his voice over the phone often sounded slightly intoxicated. I couldn't bring myself to accept Kate. I never truly saw her for who she was. "I'm so sorry," he said. Though his words were apologetic, they felt hollow to me. Deep down, I knew I couldn't forgive him. In the stillness of midnight, I listened to Kate's gentle breathing from the room next door. Exhausted from caring for her dementia during the day, I sank into the sofa, closing my eyes. "It's too late, Vincent. Kate, she's already forgotten you." My words must have cut deeply, like sharp teeth. After a long silence, as if weighing the meaning of forgotten, he muttered only, "I see." When we first began our new life, Kate would often wake up in the middle of the night, looking for Vincent. Her actions resembled wandering, and those days were incredibly challenging. "Where is Vincent? Where is my boy? Please, Cynthia, don't let him feel lonely. He's my precious son." "Kate, even after all the terrible things he had done to you, you still tried to remain a mom to him." Night after night, she moaned, cried, and searched for Vincent. And then one day, Kate truly forgot about him. Her wandering and emotional instability vanished, replaced by calm and cheerful days. Her heart had begun to embrace our new life together. When I detailed all this to Vincent, it hit him hard, deeply shocking him. After that, the calls stopped, and I have no idea where he is now. No matter how painful the past was, a new future awaits us. Having chosen to walk this path with Kate, I resolved to do everything I could to bring her smile back. Several years passed. I continued to care for Kate with Justin's help, but as her dementia progressed slowly yet steadily, I decided it was time to move out. I couldn't keep burdening Justin any longer. Now, by hiring a helper 3 times a week, I managed to balance caregiving with some personal time, though life was still a delicate balancing act. Once, Justin said something that stuck with me. "You know, I feel bad for Grandma, but isn't it hard? I mean, technically, she's not even your real mom." It's true. Taking care of a mother-in-law isn't something you can sugarcoat with pretty words. There were plenty of moments when I felt frustrated, angry, or just wanted to escape. If I had to choose, I'd say the urge to run away outweighed the strength to endure. Of course, it's hard. It's exhausting. And there are times I feel like running away, just like Vincent did, I replied. Justin's face seemed to ask, "Then why do it?" But I couldn't say, because if I gave up, you'd be the one left struggling. Even so, I continued. There are moments when caregiving feels worthwhile. Sometimes, that one good thing can make all the bad things fade away. Yes, even if there are 100 hardships, one single moment of joy can erase them all. For me, that moment was the day I first met Kate. Meeting her was like meeting the ideal mother I'd always imagined but never knew. And that was enough for me. As someone who never knew her parents' faces, the image of parents in my mind changed that day. That change became my most irreplaceable treasure. After finishing my shopping, I returned to the small apartment Kate and I now shared. As I arrived, the helper greeted me cheerfully before leaving, and Kate looked at me with a bright smile. "Oh, hello. Are you the new helper?" For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It seemed a day had finally come, the day she would forget me, too. Noticing my silence, Kate's expression clouded with unease. She cast her gaze downward and began fidgeting with her fingers. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "It seems I've become a bit forgetful. Are you? Are you a friend of mine? Or maybe my daughter? You're so young." Kate knew she had dementia. The way she timidly asked who I was, as though groping her way through the darkness, broke my heart. I held back the tears welling up in my eyes and pulled out a small tube of hand cream from my bag. It was the same peach-scented hand cream Kate had once given me. Since that day, I'd continued to buy the same one and still used it religiously. I squeezed a small amount into my palm, took Kate's hands in mine, and gently massaged it into her skin. The sweet scent of peaches filled the space between us. "That's right. I'm your daughter Kate," I said softly. Hearing this, Kate smiled warmly and brought her hands to her nose. "It smells lovely," she said with a peaceful expression. "Yes, it does," I replied with a smile of my own.
Oh, what happened? Did you lose the tuition money, Emerson? I'm so sorry, dear. I didn't know. I'll bring you lots of souvenirs from the Mediterranean, okay? What's with that look, Celine? Are you unsatisfied? Don't complain when you're just a housewife. My name is Celine. I'm 48 years old. I'm a housewife. My husband, Mason, 2 years my senior, works as an office employee. We are a family of 4, my daughter Emerson, my mother-in-law Harper, and us. My alarm clock rings at 4:30 in the morning. It's a daily routine, so I often wake up even before it goes off. I get up early to accompany Harper on her walks. It's just a walk around the house, usually done in 30 minutes at most. Despite this, because it's dangerous, Mason insists on having me accompany her. I suggested, "Why can't you go with her?" But he replied, "You just don't get it. I'm working, and I want every extra minute of sleep in the morning I can get. You're a housewife, you have all the time in the world." Thus, the responsibility was pushed onto me. Summer was manageable, but winter was dark and indeed dangerous. Despite my suggestions to take a break, Harper stubbornly continued her routine. As expected, on one cold winter morning, Harper tripped over a small stone and fell. "Are you okay, Harper?" As I reached out to help her up, she snapped back at me angrily. "Hey, Celine! What good are you if you can't even do this simple task? You're so useless." She often finds reasons to hurl insults at me. When we return from the walk, the next activity is Tai Chi. Even here, Harper finds fault with me. "Celine, I've told you before, why can't you get these simple movements right? It's like this, do it like this." "No, that's not right." "Oh, you're so slow to learn." To me, her moves seem more like a comic routine than Tai Chi, but I keep my laughter to myself. After Tai Chi, I prepare breakfast and make sandwiches for Emerson. By this time, Emerson is already up, but Mason is still asleep. When I try to wake him, he responds gruffly, "Keep it down, you idiot woman. Can't you let me sleep in peace?" If I let him sleep until the last minute before work. "Why didn't you wake me? Now I don't even have time to shave." He gets angry again. "Whether I wake you or not, you complain. Maybe you should set your own alarm clock." To which I responds, "I work every day for this family, and this is the thanks I get?" He takes his frustration out on me. These arguments always seem to happen in front of Harper. "Celine, he is right. We rely on him for our livelihood, so you should show more gratitude." She always sides with Mason. I do appreciate him, of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't silently put up with his complaints every day and handle all the household chores. I wait up for him when he comes home late without notice, and I've never let the house go without what it needs. Supporting a husband is part of a wife's role, but Mason, without acknowledging my contributions, keeps demanding gratitude and barking orders from his high horse. And then there's Harper, who complains about everything. Living with these two is a constant struggle. Initially, I didn't choose to be a housewife. Before having children, I worked full-time in an office. I quit when our child was born, planning to return to work once they started elementary school. That plan changed because of Harper. After Mason's father passed away and he decided to have Harper move in with us, she started demanding that I accompany her everywhere, to the hospital, shopping, her social gatherings. Our house is conveniently located. The bus stop is right outside, and Harper is perfectly capable of getting around. She's just being unreasonable. And she doesn't help with household chores. Mason unilaterally decided on this living arrangement without considering my opinion. Initially, I hoped her would help with housework. That hope was dashed on the very first day of living together. Celine, I've been a housewife much longer than you, raising children successfully. Now, I plan to enjoy my free time. She stated that outright and truly did nothing at all. If she had just stayed quiet, it might have been bearable, but no matter how diligently I did the housework, she kept calling me a parasite, useless. At one point, I even considered getting a part-time job. But when I mentioned this to Mason, he became irritable and retorted, "What? My earnings aren't enough for you? That's rude. Besides, no company would hire someone as dumb as you. Want to work outside like before? Don't be ridiculous. You should just keep quiet and do the housework." His salary isn't great, but he lords it over me because we have no mortgage. I continued being a housewife, believing I was doing my best for the family. Every time he demanded gratitude, I always thought to myself, "You should be the one showing gratitude first." I always thought this to myself. Since living together began, Harper's dependency on me grew worse. I was the one who always had to drive her everywhere. Carry heavy things? That was me. Any inconvenient errand? Also me. As Harper's clinginess worsened, Mason's domineering nature escalated. He started to utter hurtful words he would never have said when it was just Emerson and us living together. Whenever I tried to stand up for myself, he would invariably snap. "Shut up, you're just a housewife. Who do you think feeds you, you parasite?" That's what he would say. One day, having reached my limit, I started job hunting without Mason's permission and secured a part-time job for myself. When I told Mason and Harper about getting the job, Mason said, "I'll allow it on the condition that you don't let the quality of your housework drop." Fed up with his arrogant tone, I responded, "That's impossible. If you don't want the quality to drop, then Harper will need to help with the housework." He angrily retorted, "You expect Mom to do housework? How cruel. Mom's nearly 80 years old." Harper, with tears in her eyes, pleaded, "That's so cold. Doing housework at my age could hurt my back and legs. I agreed to live with you because you said you'd take care of the housework. Don't make such unreasonable demands." Eventually, my request for shared housework was essentially ignored, and even when I started working and came home late, Harper didn't do any housework at all. I continued to get up earlier and go to bed later than anyone else in the family, accompanying Harper on her early morning walks without a break. I became so busy that I often skipped breakfast and lunch, leading to more days without meals. One day, I fainted from anemia at work. When the company called my family, it wasn't Mason who came to pick me up, but my father, Gavin, from my childhood home. I went back to my parents' house with him. The moment I stepped into the familiar entrance of the home where I grew up, the tears I had been holding back overflowed. I told my father about everything Mason and Harper had done to me, crying all the while. After a while, Mason came to pick me up. Unusually unsettled, he made a brief eye contact to my father and took me back home. At home, an irritated Harper was waiting. "Celine, you are so sarcastic, going back to your parents' house. It's as if you're implying I've been oppressing you. If you had told us, we would have come to pick you up. That's terrible of you." She continued to complain incessantly, not even asking about my fainting or how I was feeling. I was utterly exasperated, but I didn't have the energy to respond. "I'm sorry," I said, and then I took the day off to rest. After that, I started finding ways to reduce the burden of household chores. Like using delivery services instead of going to the grocery store and buying ready-made meals, even if it was a bit more expensive. I also started asking Harper to use taxis when I couldn't provide transportation. I didn't want to faint again and be a burden at work. Meanwhile, the harassment from Mason and Harper only got worse. "You're lowering the quality of housework, such a terrible wife. A useless and foolish wife." Harper continued with her complaints. "I can't eat something this salty. Oh my, it's disgusting. It's like animal feed." Such snide remarks were made persistently, every single day. One day, Harper suddenly suggested going on a trip. She spoke to me in a cajoling tone. "Hey, Celine. You must have saved up some money from your part-time job by now. How about we go relax at a resort this holiday season?" That year, Emerson was preparing for college, so a trip was really not feasible. "Well, Emerson has extracurricular activities and exams, so it's difficult this year. If she gets into college, we can think about a summer vacation." I tried to deflect, but for some reason, Harper suddenly became angry. "Celine, that was such a snide move, going back to your parents' house. It makes it look like I've been oppressing you. We would have come to pick you up if you had told us." That was harsh. Frustrated with her ranting, I retorted. "Listen, I didn't say we wouldn't go on a trip. I'm saying the timing is bad right now. Emerson is considering transferring if she doesn't get into her first choice college. If she has to transfer, we'll need to buy new textbooks. Can you please stop interfering with her efforts to get accepted? If you insist, I'll make a reservation for you, but please go alone." After I said this, she turned red with anger. "You devil!" She hissed a parting shot and stormed off to her room. I had been saving my hard-earned salary diligently, preparing for Emerson's college entrance fees and tuition. Since Emerson was planning to transfer if necessary, the money would be needed either way. I didn't want to waste it on a frivolous family vacation for Harper's whims. Several months later, Emerson successfully got into her first-choice university. Watching her daily efforts in studies and extracurricular activities, I felt relieved and incredibly happy. The next day was her high school graduation. During breakfast, Harper, with a smug smile, said, "Celine, we're going on an overseas trip tomorrow. Just so you know." "What? You mean Mason is going too?" Harper had a triumphant look on her face. "Yes. You did nothing, so I talked to Mason and he booked it right away. Guess where? The Mediterranean. It's been so long since our last overseas trip. Oh, I can't wait." "Harper, are you mistaken about the departure date? Tomorrow is Emerson's graduation ceremony. He is supposed to attend." "Right, Mason?" I looked at Mason. He was silently sipping his soup, but his face seemed to be holding back a laugh. Emerson, present at the table, looked puzzled. Harper showed me the airline tickets with a mean smile on her face. The departure date was indeed tomorrow. I was so shocked that I froze. Mason, with a nasty grin, said, "I was planning to attend the graduation ceremony, but then I thought it's more important to be filial. Just take some photos of the ceremony for me. That'll be enough for me, thanks." That remark snapped me out of my daze. Filial? Mason, we didn't get any bonuses because of the recession. Where did you find the budget for a Mediterranean trip? When I asked, his response was unbelievable. From your savings, of course. Didn't you say it was for the summer vacation? It's the same thing if we use it now. I was astonished and appalled. That savings was for Emerson's tuition, I told you that. What about her enrollment fees? Can't be helped. We've already bought the tickets. Well, I have to go to work. Mom, please pack the bags. As he left in a hurry, I frantically checked my bank balance on my mobile phone. Almost nothing was left. I turned pale with shock. Emerson looked at me, worried. Harper, still smirking, said, "Oh, what happened? Did the tuition money disappear?" My bad. I said anywhere would do, but Mason wanted to be filial, you see. We could have saved more if it was just a holiday trip. Sorry, Emerson, I didn't know that. We'll bring lots of souvenirs from the Mediterranean. Emerson and I were both frozen in shock. The next morning, Mason and Harper left in high spirits. I was so frustrated that I felt like crying, but I desperately held back the tears. Emerson, who should have been celebrating her graduation, looked gloomy. It was natural, considering her father had brushed her off and used up her college enrollment money. While I understood Mason's desire to be filial, it was unforgivable for a father to deplete the entire savings I had meticulously built for Emerson's tuition. That day, as I watched Emerson receive her diploma at the graduation ceremony with tears in my eyes, I made up my mind to execute a certain plan. It was a last resort. Something I had thought of doing if Mason and Harper's harassment became unbearable. I called my father at my childhood home. I had previously told him about the ongoing harassment from Harper and Mason. This plan was originally his idea, born out of concern for me. With his consent, I gripped a hammer and went to Harper's room. I started to break down the walls with the hammer. It was unexpectedly exhilarating, so I handed Emerson a hammer and together, we went around hitting various spots. Once the room was demolished and I felt a sense of relief, I called a demolition company. The next day, the workers arrived and started demolishing the house. We packed our belongings, watching from a distance as the floors were ripped up and doors fell, and in the evening, we left the house and moved to my father's place. The following Sunday, while relaxing at my parents' house, my mobile phone rang. "Hey, Celine! It's me! What's going on? Our house is gone! Where are you now?" It was Mason, back from the Mediterranean. I told the flustered him. "As you can see, I had it demolished. Your and Harper's belongings have been sent to your brother's place." "What? How dare you do this on your own? Give me back my house." "The house you were living in is gone. You might as well rely on your brother now." I said this and hung up the phone. A while later, the doorbell at my father's house rang. Mason and Harper barged in, suitcases in hand, shouting. Harper was red-faced with anger. "How could you do this? You destroyed the unique house that Mason built. Do you even realize what you've done?" My father and I exchanged glances and burst into laughter. It seemed that even in this situation, Mason hadn't told his mother the truth. Standing next to Harper, Mason had shrunk and stayed silent.
What's so funny?
As Harper fumed with rage, my father gently explained.
There seems to be a misunderstanding. That house was in Celine's name. What?
Harper made a startled sound.
It's true. The land originally belonged to me. But even if the land was yours, Mason built the house. He worked hard and paid for it with his salary. It was Mason's house in his name, and Celine demolished it without permission. We'll demand compensation for this.
Mason was still silent as ever. Harper seemed genuinely unaware of the truth. I reluctantly began to explain.
My father built that house.
She turned to me with bloodshot eyes. Her eyes were so wide with surprise, they looked as if they might pop out.
What are you saying? Mason was paying a monthly mortgage. He worked hard and earned the money to build that house. Don't destroy his hard work and then tell such an obvious lie.
Harper, you really don't know?
The land belonged to my father, and he built the house. Moreover, the house was in my name.
This is the truth.
He built the house on the condition that it would be in my name. Mason was aware of this. You seem to be under a big misunderstanding, but please ask him about it.
Mason was trembling slightly, still looking down. Harper shouted at him.
You're lying, Mason! Say something in your defense.
He, in a weak voice, admitted. Sorry, Mom. What Celine is saying is true. The house was built by her father for us.
Then, what about the mortgage?
Silence filled the room, speaking volumes. And that silence said it all. Mason had boasted to Harper about a house my father built as if it were his own achievement. My father spoke quietly.
Mason, I built that house for you and Celine to live happily. Legally speaking, it may have been different, but in my heart, I had given it to you. However, unfortunately, Celine was unhappy living there. You and your mother treated her like an unpaid housekeeper. I had essentially lent the land and house to you for free on the condition you would make Celine happy. But since she wasn't happy, I'm taking back the land.
Harper's face went pale as if she was about to faint, opening and closing her mouth in disbelief. It was understandable that she had believed all this time that her son had built the house.
Celine, show them what you've prepared.
Prompted by my father, I nodded, stood up, and brought the completed divorce papers to the table. I spoke slowly.
I didn't want to destroy the house where I had lived for so long. But you two have treated me like an animal for years. No matter how much you insulted me, I did my duty as a housewife and a wife. But I couldn't bear it any longer. That house no longer exists. Let's end our relationship here today.
Mason was slumped over, his head down in defeat. Harper, with a face as white as a famous painter's depiction of a screaming person, was frozen with her mouth agape. This is how Mason and I got divorced. Afterwards, Mason started living in an old house with Harper, reportedly so run down that it was infested with mice. Rumor has it that the house is so old that it's infested with mice. It was a far cry from the spacious, beautiful house my father had built, and surely very inconvenient. But that was no longer my concern. Along with Emerson and my father, I am living happily at my childhood home. My father covered Emerson's university enrollment fee, which I later repaid with my earnings. Despite her busy schedule with studies, Emerson seems to enjoy every day. She happily helps with the household chores. With the help from them, I have more time and financial freedom.
Maybe I'll start taking some classes for myself.
I'm contemplating that. Right now, I'm extremely happy.